Welcome to Immigreats, the podcast that highlights stories of immigrants making great contributions in their adopted countries. My name is Munatsi and I'm your host. I was born and raised in Zimbabwe and now live in Texas with my family. Before getting into today's episode, I'm excited to share a word from our sponsor. I'm grateful for my friends at Alma Law here in the Dallas, Texas area. Alma Law is one of the United States' top immigration law firms. They're a great resource for immigrants already in the United States and for people looking for professional assistance to make the move to the United States. I can confirm that the process of moving to the United States can seem daunting. Alma Law specializes in handling all manner of immigration cases, from J-1 physician visas, investor and entrepreneur visas, family immigration law, temporary employment, special petitions, permanent resident adjustments, and even employer compliance. You can call them in the U.S. on 972-573-8575 or email them at help@almalaw.com to schedule a consultation. You can also visit their website at alma-law.com for more information. In today's episode, I'm excited to have a conversation with a lady named Ghida Dagher. Ghida has been in the U.S. for a while and is one of those immigrants that I'm really, really proud to get to highlight on this show. She's got an incredible story that I'll let her share on her own, but she's doing some incredible work even today, work that I believe is making America a better place, making America a safer place, and making America a more inclusive place. Ghida, welcome to Immigreats.
Thank you. I'm so excited and happy to be here. Thank you for having me on.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. Let's get into it. I would love to, just start by hearing a little bit of your story. I know you were not born and raised in the United States, so tell us about where you were born and kind of where you were raised and kind of the journey that led you to the United States, if you don't mind.
Yeah, of course. Happy to share. So as you mentioned, I wasn't born here. I was actually born in Sierra Leone in West Africa. Third generation Sierra Leonean, 100% Lebanese, but a first generation American. So I moved here when I was a couple of months shy of 10 years old, and my family came seeking political asylum. We came as a result of civil war in Sierra Leone and unrest in Lebanon. And so both of, the motherlands were not the safest, not the most stable. And by the time that I was almost at that age, my family, my parents had lost their home 4 different times and had to start over from scratch. So coming to the United States for them was a really big decision to bring the family here and to give us a stable environment to be in, and a place where our education could be uninterrupted, where there was an endless potential for what we wanted to accomplish or could accomplish. But it's not a decision, as you know, that any family takes lightly. It's a really big deal to do that. And so we came, and you mentioned having physicians and other professionals that come to do work in this country. My father's a doctor, gastroenterologist, wasn't able to practice in the United States because he was educated elsewhere. And so everything that you can imagine, from navigating new systems that are quite complex, whether it's in the immigration or education system or employment systems, and having to work as underemployed, overqualified, underemployed, as many immigrants do in the country, to just learning the systems, the social systems that might exist here. All of that was a big transition. But my family and I, we all moved here and adjusted, and we moved to Dearborn, Michigan, which is the Arab American hub of the country. And we moved here. My family chose here because they had family here. My mom had a sister and my dad had a brother who was here, and they figured it was probably one of the easiest ways to get and assimilate into it. Now, of course, the weather was a giant shift for us coming from West Africa. Michigan, as you know, has some pretty harsh winters, but of course, the opportunities that it presented were totally were welcomed. We knew it was going to be a hard journey, but a necessary journey for our success and for, frankly, our stability and for our futures. And so that's the super early version of it. I went on to go to the University of Michigan to study political science and Middle Eastern North African studies. I didn't go to the University of Michigan with that intention. I thought I was going to become a doctor. That's the thing I grew up thinking I was going to be. And the reason that is like every immigrant family, and when you are abroad, medicine is just such an honorable field. It's one that can be used and is useful anywhere in the world. It's one that you can make very positive and direct change. And I grew up watching my father do that. And so I thought this was really what I wanted to do. And when I got into college, I very quickly realized it's not about the medicine. It was actually about the change element of it. It was around the environments and the policies that make it possible to provide care and provide what people needed. And that actually became the shift for me. So I called home and I said, hey, I don't think I'm going to become a doctor. I'm going to do this other thing. And funny enough, they all reacted with, yeah, we knew that.
That's cool. Yeah, I can relate to being an immigrant and and medicine being a big deal. In fact, I a few weeks ago I had the opportunity to interview a cousin of mine who actually has done amazing here in the U.S. She actually is a general in the U.S. Army, and
wow.
She was talking about how when she was growing up too, it was you can be a doctor or a lawyer. That's about the options that
and maybe an engineer.
Yeah, maybe. But doctor and lawyer, it felt like doctor was always number one before the other options. So I can certainly relate to that. And but I'm glad that your parents were supportive, because I know sometimes that doesn't always go well when a child decides, look, I'm going to go in a different direction than what the parents maybe had in mind or what they thought the parents had in mind. So.
Yeah, no, my parents, I'm very fortunate to be the daughter of two incredible human beings who are just so loving, so supportive. I feel like I hit the jackpot in that sense. But I think the unsung heroes of any immigrant story is the parents, and are the parents, and who frankly sacrifice so much of their dreams and their aspirations or what they imagine their life to look like to plant seeds in a new place and watch them grow. It takes a lot of patience, a lot of love, a lot of dedication, and unwavering support to do that. So they're always the unsung heroes. And so shout out to all the immigrant parents who make that happen.
Yeah, shout out to them for sure. No, that's cool. How old were you when you guys immigrated to the U.S.?
I was a couple months shy of 10 years old. And so I have very vivid memories of my childhood in Sierra Leone. I have also very clear sort of formative years here in the U.S. So I'm very much a third culture kid. If you're a third culture kid, you know what that means. Your identity, ethnicity, your heritage is one thing, upbringing is another, and then sort of your life that you're living is a third. And so I am through and through a third culture kid.
That's neat. I'm really glad that we get to kind of hear your story today. Just curious, can you tell us a little bit more about what growing up in Dearborn, Michigan, was like? I know once you arrived, I know, a little bit about the area. I also know that there's, kind of a, stronger kind of Arab Muslim population kind of in that part of the country. Yeah. And so just, would love for you to unpack a little bit what it was like going to school there, being a young kid, what was the diversity like and so on.
Yeah, absolutely. No, Dearborn is a wonderful place. It's a special place. It is one that is very diverse, and further, Metro Detroit in general is just one of the greatest places. The city of Detroit just holds such a special place in my heart, and for lots of reasons. And one of them being the communities that it holds and is home to. And the Arab American community is absolutely one of them. Dearborn is very rich culturally. You walk around, there are signs in Arabic. You hear people speaking multiple languages. There are lots of small businesses, schools. When I was growing up, there was sort of like an east side and west side. East side where most of the Arabs were. West side was where sort of more of the white community, more affluent, maybe folks who are maybe a little bit more further along their economic journey. Or at the east side and the south end were more immigrant based. And so we moved and grew up on the east side, and then but through that upbringing, I was able to get exposure to a lot of cultures. Also, being in Metro Detroit, Detroit is home to a large Latino community as well, Southwest Detroit, and it's big to a Bengali community, and also other Middle Eastern communities that exist. You have some communities out here who aren't Arab but are Middle Eastern, and I think that's an important distinction also for them. And a lot of Asian American communities. I mentioned the Bengali community, but there's also Indian and Pakistani, and then there's also a Black immigrant community that is sort of like is a gem of its own in the community that it's built around itself. And so I got to experience a lot of that work, and early on, I used to volunteer in a lot of projects. I used to do a lot of different extracurricular activities, and I got to experience a lot of that. Now, being a kid in school here was a little different, of course.
Mm.
I will have to say, it felt like schools abroad in Sierra Leone were much more academically challenging, which is often a surprise for folks.
Yeah.
I went to a school that was it's an international school, so a British system. Sierra Leone used to be a British colony, so that's the education system there. The academics there are tougher. They expect you to be more well-rounded. It's not just science class. No, you're taking a chemistry class, you're taking a physics class, you're taking a biology class, and it's broken out in that way. And, all of these different pieces. So that was a little different, but there was an emphasis here on sports, for example. Wasn't something that was an emphasis on growing up over there. So it became something that I adapted to. I can tell you one of the things that I was, you have these little things that stick in your head as like moments of like, yeah, we're in a different place now. When I saw everybody drinking out of water fountains, that's not something you do overseas. You're not drinking from a pipe that water is coming out of. Michigan is a home of the Great Lakes, and so water is clean and fresh, and we're fortunate to have that. And so I saw kids drinking from water fountains, and I thought, yeah, I'm not in Sierra Leone.
There's definitely a third culture element right there, right? Like, okay.
Yeah, absolutely. But on the flip side of that, also, I grew up in a cultural enclave, obviously here, but the timing of our move, a couple years later, 9/11 happened.
Yeah.
And obviously tragic and sad for lots of reasons. There was loss of life, but there was also a long-term impact on a community that had to face the brunt of actions that they weren't responsible for, but people pointed to them. And, I'm talking about the Muslim community. I'm talking about the Arab community. I'm talking about anybody that was actually even perceived to be those people. So folks who maybe were in the AAPI community, right? That people looked at, and they conflated identities, and they, of course, blamed them for a tragic and horrific situation that was no cause of their own. But they had to carry that weight for a long time, whether it was policies, whether it was surveillance, whether it was families that got separated, whether it was visas that didn't get renewed. I watched that happen in real time to people around me, to people in my own family. And that was a difficult time, but it was also a very critical time because it became part of my formative political identity growing up here. And obviously that's influenced my work, and it's influenced a lot of different things. But, even again, being in Detroit in an area and seeing the economic disparities that were impacting the Detroit area compared to other major cities, or some of these things, we were very cognizantly aware of these things growing up and seeing it. And so it played a major role in my development politically, socially, and the things that I cared about.
That's cool. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I think that's important. That's important. So if we fast forward a little bit, so you go to the University of Michigan, you graduate from there. So are you a big blue fan even now? Are you one of those?
Oh my God, I bleed maize and blue. I'm a diehard Wolverine.
Okay, well, congrats on the football national title.
Thank you. It was, we're used to winning, but this was still very sweet. I am very proud of those boys, and I'm excited for them. I'm a season ticket holder, so I'm excited to be back at the big house in September to continue. Obviously, I'm really proud of the university in general. It was for me to share a little bit about that. Why I'm really proud of that university is because it really allowed me to flourish as a leader. It created spaces for me. Student leadership, I think, is so critical. It's a really important space for kids to develop, students to develop, young adults to develop their leadership skills to face some real world situations. I received so much, I think, of my preparation for the professional world by being a student leader on campus. And I'm talking about beyond the classroom. I'm talking about student organizations. I'm talking about activism. I'm talking about social activities, extracurricular happenings those were so critical in my development too. And so I think the University of Michigan is a really great place to do that. It allows you to face some serious questions, to contemplate, to question, to ask. And there's a lot of different diversity of thought on that campus. On all issues, on all ethnicities, on all political spectrums, on all areas of academia. And so it's a real good sort of like breeding ground for development in that sense. And it holds a special place in my heart because of that.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool. One of the things that I found fascinating just from a distance when learning about Michigan or watching kind of is how, I think for a long time, I think Michigan's been known to be a swing state politically, which I guess, what that's always told me is that there is diversity of opinions and, and also, flexibility, I think, where, a lot of the voters, the electorate in Michigan will make, some of their voting decisions based off of, I don't know, policy and maybe who, who they just feel they want to support.
Yeah.
So they don't necessarily hold on to, I'm Republican or I'm Democrat, but it's more, and I'm guessing that's what part of what makes it a swing state, which I'd imagine would make it interesting as a young student, as a young mind, kind of just starting to process a lot of these adult issues growing up. So.
Yeah, absolutely. There's not a monolith when it comes to the voter in Michigan and the political perspectives in Michigan. I think you have everything from the super conservative to the super liberal and everything in between. And you have a good portion that sits in the middle and a good portion that is navigating these issues or has perspective or still developing, or, you have some folks who might be socially socially liberal, but fiscally conservative, and they still figure out a way to navigate that and do it. And so Michigan is always a fascinating place politically because of that. And I think, there's always been even if you look at the history of it, there's a sense of swinging also in the sense of there's been decades of red, there's been decades of blue, there's sort of decades of in the middle. And so I don't think anybody can ever take Michigan for granted when we're talking about election years or we're talking about what's happening. And often Michigan is a real snapshot of what's to come in other places. And so, and we saw some of that happen in the pandemic. We, sadly, for example, the January 6th attacks on the Capitol, Michigan had its own version of that several months prior. And when you see some of that escalate, we know that it's probably going to be bubbling up in other places or things like that happening. And it's also not, when I talk politically, I'm also talking about the business side of things. There's a lot of major companies and corporations that are here, and there's also a lot of small businesses, and we have to figure out a way to make all of those things work. So governing in a state of Michigan is not easy. Winning in a state of Michigan is not easy. But I do feel very strongly, and we'll talk about this with our work at New American Leaders, that that we have a very important role to play in that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So you graduate from University of Michigan. Can you just talk us through kind of what your professional journey has been like since then, and then kind of culminating to your role today at New American Leaders?
Absolutely. I felt very strongly after graduating that I wanted to stay in the state of Michigan. At the time, it was right after the recession, and there were still some very hard times that were happening. Most of the people that I knew left the state of Michigan and went to places like New York and Washington, D.C. and the Bay Area and Chicago for great opportunities. I felt very strongly about staying here and contributing to solutions for my own community and right here in the Metro Detroit area. And so I actually joined an organization called Access and the National Network for Arab American Communities. I did policy work for immigration reform and voting rights in particular. I felt that those two were such a big piece of who I am. I didn't become a citizen until my senior year of college. And so the immigration story was still something that was very fresh and something that my family was going to. And I knew it was an issue that was impacting others. And so I wanted to work on big picture policy change as it relates to that, and also empower people to remind them that they have a voice in things that are happening. And so to engage new Americans in that sense. So I did that for a few years. And then candidly, the immigration work, it burns you out. It is a really big issue. It's a massive reform that's required, and it was almost a little too close to home at that point. And so I wanted to be able to contribute in particular to the Metro Detroit region and the working families. And so I moved over. I went to work at United Way for a few years, and I did government and community partnerships there. I worked with elected officials to educate them on issues that that the Metro Detroit area was facing. And so things like public education and the challenges that exist around funding with that. Things like economic mobility. How do we help families go from paycheck to something a little bit more consistent? Or how do we help them survive through, being one emergency away from being broke, right? Like all of these different pieces that impact us. And then also around public health. So I worked a lot around those issues for quite some time. While I was doing that work, I was asked to attend a training called New American Leaders Project. It was a small little group of people that came together, and it was for folks that people saw potential in to maybe run for office. I have no interest at the time to run for office, but I did go to the training, and I walked in, and it was a group of 15 of us, a small, humble group, and of leaders, community leaders. And it was folks from different walks of life. And it was the first time that I walked into a room that had these different diverse voices in one room, engaging around what our future might look like. And so there was, again, it was Latinos, it was Arabs, it was Asian American, it was Black immigrants. And that is actually the project was the initial phase of what is now the New American Leaders, which I'm the CEO of. And I had no idea that would eventually happen, but, I really walked in as a student of that moment. We learned and talked about how to message, how to talk about ourselves, nuts and bolts of campaigns. And I walked away from that training thinking to myself, the world would would look so different if all of us were in positions of power. And I was just thinking about all the different things that the policies or the conversations where our issues would be there front and center, or we wouldn't shy away from talking about these, or frankly, even bringing a perspective up. So it really encouraged me to start actually managing campaigns and running people for office. And I felt strongly about starting to change some of that demographic of representation. When you are able to walk into an elected official's office and see that they understand that experience, that lived experience that you're going through, it makes a world of a difference in how they legislate, how they write policy, how they write resolutions, how they even show up and talk to their community about things. And so I went on to manage multiple campaigns. The organization then pulled me in to become a trainer while I was working full time. And so I was traveling the country to train folks, be places in New York, in Texas, in California. And it was, fulfilling a part of me that wanted to work with our immigrant communities everywhere. And while that was happening, I opened up eventually a political consultancy. The work grew so much. It was really a wonderful experience. And at the time, then a candidate by the name of Gretchen Whitmer was running for governor.
Okay.
And I had spent so much time at this point with immigrant communities and knew so many of the folks that when I saw her on the campaign trail, I would say, hey, we have some really great people. I hope that you'll consider for representation in the administration. And of course, she was super open to it. And when she did become governor-elect, I submitted a list of names of new Americans who I thought should be considered. And it was really just, hey, check this out. These are really great people. These are people who actually do the work on the ground. These aren't sort of like the gatekeepers. These aren't folks who are doing it for attention, but really are actually doing the work. And the next thing I know, I was asked to serve as a director of appointments for the governor. And what that means here in the state of Michigan is that I was overseeing of finding talent and people to sit on over 350 boards and commissions and judicial positions. So things ranging from services to the aging to Iron Industry Museum up in northern Michigan, to things like university boards. And so I did that job for almost 3 years, and it was such an honor, such a privilege. And in the almost 3 years, we made 2,100 appointments to these different boards and commissions. So massive. And the governor was such a wonderful leader to watch and allowed us to champion this and to do this work on her behalf. And it was really wonderful. And then, of course, New American Leaders came knocking. And in this opportunity, truly, it was such a homecoming to come back to New American Leaders and to do the work that we're doing now.
Okay. No, that's cool. I do remember kind of reading about Governor Whitmer at the time, and trying to remember, maybe the details might be sketchy, but I think President Trump and there was some kind of some budding by to put it.
No, the details aren't sketchy. You're head on.
I just trying to recall, but I remember. Her speaking out and standing up first on against some stuff. Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, no, he had a real issue with the woman in power, and he was very vocal about it. And as a matter of fact, he would refer to her as that woman from Michigan rather than name her, and would rally sort of folks to be vocal against her. And he was very critical of her. We obviously know a lot about why that is, but it was all eyes on Michigan in a lot of ways, and particularly during the pandemic. And of course, that was something unprecedented challenges that all of us had to navigate as a people, and then let alone to navigate that as a governor of a state. And really proud of her leadership there, and to have served during that time, because it really was incredibly challenging, and to the point, actually, the polarization of what you just mentioned, of pointing to her in that way and being so critical of her, fueled very sadly a kidnapping and a death attempt against her by some of those folks at the extreme right of that. So it was challenging, but again points to a lot of the down points, the low points that exist in our democracy, and how it really takes all of us to be a little bit better about how we navigate, how we talk, how we engage, and how we do work.
Yeah, agreed, 100%. No, thank you. So you move back, so you come back to New American Leaders, and now you're wearing the hat of CEO of the organization.
Yeah.
Tell us now, what is what is the mission of New American Leaders, just in more detail, and what is the work that you're doing now to advance advance the cause?
Yeah, absolutely. So New American Leaders is the only national organization that's dedicated to training and preparing immigrants, first and second generation Americans, to run for office, lead campaigns, and to pursue appointments. So it's not just about civic participation, it's about civic leadership of new Americans of every part of this country. It's national in its scope, but then we also have core states that we work in and double down our investments in. Okay. We've actually trained over 1,700 people around the country to run for office, to lead campaigns. And we've been around now for about 14 years doing this really incredible work. And what's really beautiful about it is sort of what I said earlier. When I walked in as a participant, I was just so in love with the diversity in the room. And so all the work that we do is cross-racial, multi-ethnic, and it brings in people from all walks of life. And what it's really doing is lifting people, community leaders, everyday folks, and taking their lived experiences and putting it at the center of leadership, which I think is so, so wonderful and critical. So as our country becomes younger and more diverse, our leaders have to reflect that change as well if we want to be successful and if we want to thrive and not fall behind on leadership in the world. So we know that new Americans are the future of our democracy, and we are so proud to empower them through our trainings, to empower them through our continued learning opportunities, and to remind them that we're here to support them through that journey. And so our base, as I'll share with you a little bit about the diversity and the base that comes through this organization. The average participant is about 32 years old. Okay. About 60% are women, about 15% are LGBTQ, and over 95% identify as a person of color. So it is incredibly wonderful and beautiful group of people that come through, and we're incredibly proud of the leadership that we've helped nurture and foster and really play a piece of their journey into stepping up and representing all of us and making our democracy stronger.
Oh, that's cool. What are some of the states that you've kind of doubled down on? I'm just curious.
Yeah, absolutely. So our core states are New York, Michigan, Georgia, Arizona, Nevada, Colorado, and California right now, and those are always growing. And the reason that is, there's reasons those particular states are picked. One, there is large new American communities there that we think are primed for leadership. Secondly, often they tend to be sometimes swing states. To your point earlier, they play critical political roles in the development overall as a country. And three, there's a disparity. There's a large disparity in representation of those people. So often, for example, people will say, well, New York is very diverse. So we know that. There's a lot of people there. Yes, there are lots of new Americans. But there's still a disparity in representation in elected office, whether it is at city council or whether it is at the state level or whether federal or whether some of the local seats that folks have. So, we're working to remedy and empower more people so that they can run in those spaces.
Okay, that's cool. Can you give some examples of some actual elected officials today that have been part of the New American Leader program? Just curious.
Yes, absolutely. Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib is an alum of our programs. And actually, it was Rashida who tapped me on the shoulder to ask me to do this training the first time that I did it. And so it's been when at the time she was a state legislature when she had asked me, but she had, and now she's a member of Congress, the first Palestinian, one of the two first Muslim women, her along with Ilhan Omar from Minnesota, of course. Yep. And then City Council in New York, which I'm really proud of. The City Council in New York is 20% of its members are alums or members of our network, which is incredible. And that was many firsts. It's the first. There's the first South Asian American on there, the first Muslim, the first LGBT Black person on the board, on the City Council. Those are because of us. Shahana Hanif, Shakar Krishnan, Crystal Hudson, just phenomenal folks. And then, of course, if you go towards the Southwest, you have in places like Arizona, key states, many that are in leadership now are also New American alum, folks like State Senator Ana Hernandez and Annalise Ortiz, and for another member of the community, of our community, who started off as elected representing their district and then went on to represent statewide, is Raquel, who's actually now running for Congress. So you see the journey of leadership and why it's so important to invest locally and early and to foster and nurture, and because it takes a long time to build political power. So it's important for us to invest early. So someone like Raquel Teran ran for the legislature and then went to run the party and is now running for Congress. So it's really, really powerful. In Colorado, now Congresswoman Yadira Carabo is one of our alumni as well. So it's really wonderful to see that. Yeah, so it's all over the country. I can give you examples in all of our core states, but it's really powerful to see how far new Americans are coming in the political journey and their leadership, and to be able to also build more locally as well. Our elected officials, we have an elected officials network, aside from the training programs. We have an elected officials network, and that network has elected officials who serve at school boards, serve at library boards, serve at county level boards, all the way up to members of Congress. And so it's really important for us that we're creating a community that supports our elected officials once they're in. That doesn't make them feel sort of stranded. Yes, we've made major strides everywhere, but it's not like there is big groups and numbers of those people in the areas that they are serving often. And so often the work feels lonely, or it feels like there's a lot of challenges. And so through our elected officials network, what we're doing is creating a community for elected officials across the network and across the country to engage, to learn from one another, to continue learning as well.
That's awesome. Thank you. I'm glad you got to highlight even in that answer just the participation across all walks of life. I grew up in Zimbabwe, like we talked about, and kind of the system of government and governance is very different. In Zimbabwe, I don't get an opportunity to, run to be on the school board and be able to kind of have direct influence on, what the school system is teaching and what they're doing, and be able to participate in at that level. So I do like the fact that, here in the American system, there are opportunities to participate, whether you want to run for president potentially, or for, Congress, or if you just want something local, that matters to you and you want to participate in that, there's those opportunities. And I think, I'm glad that you guys are encouraging, participation, even if it's not for the glamour, type of seats that we hear about and read about all the time. So,
yeah. And I'm so glad you say that. You mentioned that in particular. The work lesson itself is often portrayed as, where money is at, or there's a lot of flexibility, or there's a lot of glamour, and it's a sexy thing to do. But in reality, it's being in governance and in politics is hard work.
Yeah,
it takes some sacrifices. It takes a dedication. It takes a love of community. It really has to be selfless work in order for it to be real work and to be good work. And often, and by the way, all of which attributes and characteristics and challenges that new Americans are very familiar with themselves in their own journey. Nothing new to them, which is in ways why they're really great candidates. And they're really great people to serve and pursue appointments. And so I'm glad that you mentioned that, but it is really important work. It's not easy work. It's selfless work. But it is such important work. And to be able to step up and say like, hey, I don't like what's happening in my school, at school for my kids, or to say, I'm having an issue with some of these small businesses and how they're being treated, or whatever it might be, whatever your root issue is or what your why is in the big picture. It's really, you have the opportunity to step up. And that's the beautiful thing. And that's actually my advice to anybody who's even remotely interested in serving some way, somehow. It's don't wait for anybody to ask you to do this work. Take it in your own hands. Change whatever is around you that is that. So new Americans are needed everywhere. People to run for office in general are needed. So why not contribute and bring your voice that is so enriched with lived experiences, that is culturally aware and competent, that is also passionate about issues that impact all of us, new American and not new American. You know, we often talk about, yes, what a difference it makes that new Americans are serving, but new Americans are serving all people. They're not just serving new Americans. You know, when you're elected officials, you don't say, I'm here to just represent this group of people. You're here to represent everyone. So don't wait for permission. Don't wait for somebody to ask you. Jump in. And if you do decide to jump in, New American Leaders, newamericanleaders.org, is here to support you and encourage you and to be a part of your journey and to educate you on what's happening.
Absolutely. No, thank you. Thank you, Ghida. I want to be conscious of your time. And so if you don't mind just sharing, you know, if somebody is watching or listening and they want to be able to reach out to you and contact you, what are the best ways, you know, for somebody to find you?
If you're interested in learning more about what we do or have even an inkling of you that's interested in doing public service work, check us out at newamericanleaders.org. Of course, we're also on all of the social media platforms, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, Facebook, and where there's a ton of resources. But always the easiest way to get to us is newamericanleaders.org. And we want to support you through your journey and even help you explore whether this is a thing for you or not. But we're here to be a resource and to continue to build, especially in such a critical year as this, during this election cycle and for the years to come. We want your voices to be a part of the conversation, and we're here to support you through that.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ghida. It's been a real pleasure getting to talk with you and learn from your story. The work you're doing is incredible.
Right back at you.
Yeah, I'm very big on civic participation, and so I'm going to try to do my best to kind of amplify your voice.
I appreciate that.
That there are resources out there, because I do think that we have to be careful about outsourcing responsibility for the things that matter to us, too much.
Absolutely.
So really, really grateful for this time that we've spent.
I love how you said that. I love how you frame that. It's the outsourcing of things that are responsibilities that belong to us. That's a really powerful way to say that, Munatsi, and I appreciate you reaching out to invite us. And congratulations on the success so far. I know this is it's first of all a great name. It's a great conversation, and I think the podcast is going to reach a lot of people. So keep us posted if there's ways that we can support you along your journey. I hope that maybe you'll consider it. Sounds like you're already engaged in a few things. So maybe at some point you need to think about whether you should run for office or pursue something too.
No, thank you, Ghida. I really appreciate your time, and I'm sure the listeners will enjoy this conversation. So that's the story of Ghida Dagher, an immigrant who's making great impact, not only in her home state of Michigan, but in the United States at large. Please like this podcast and follow us on your podcast player to catch new episodes. You can find us on social media under the name Immigreats, or you can visit our website at immigrates.net and enter your email address to join the growing Immigreats community. Until next time.